Good morning. Yesterday we were talking about this persistent legend. No, it's all right. I'm not going to sing to you again today. But the persistent legend that Jesus might have travelled with Joseph of Arimathea to Glastonbury. But the legend goes on even further than that, because it says after Jesus' resurrection, after his ascension, in later years, Joseph of Arimathea came back again on his journey as a merchant and came again to Glastonbury. This time, not just to trade, but to share the gospel as well. And as he shares the gospel there, the people are astounded by what they hear, and they don't really believe what he is saying. So he said, I will prove it to you. And taking the staff in his hand, he drove it into the ground. The following day, when they got up, this staff had not just taken root, it had actually borne flowers and fruit as well, standing there in the midst of Glastonbury. And if you go to Glastonbury today, you'll still find growing in that area what is known as the holy thorn. It is part of this particular rod that Joseph of Arimathea drove into the ground all those years ago. Oh yes, cuttings upon cuttings upon cuttings, but they still stay in Glastonbury. This is truly still the holy thorn, and it still flowers at the end of the year in this month of December. And on the Christmas day, a small cutting from the holy thorn is always taken to the Queen's dining table and put on there as a reminder to her of when the Christian faith first came to this country. So those are just legends, but just legends. But it's sometimes fun to look at legends and see if there's any truth in them. But as we look back, there's could be a grain of truth, but we don't really know where it is. And most of the time, we must stay with the scriptures, because the scriptures we can accept as being the word of God. And these legends are things which change over the years, and we have to be careful when we are thinking about them or listening to them. The next actual scriptural evidence we have about Jesus was at his Bar Mitzvah. Now, he had been trained to quite an extent by the time he reaches this particular age, about 11 or 12. Every year, Joseph and Mary would travel up to Jerusalem with a group from Nazareth. They traveled from Nazareth, as they down to the Jordan, across the Jordan to Jericho, then up to Jerusalem. A 3-day journey at least. And they would go there for the major feasts. And they would go every day year to celebrate the great feast of Passover. Now, why I think this was Jesus' Bar Mitzvah, because something goes wrong with the family arrangements. I'm not sure if you've ever seen these Bar Mitzvahs taking place. If ever you go to Jerusalem, go to the Wailing Wall on Monday morning. This is where all these young boys come with their families, and there's trumpets blowing and there's balloons flying, and it's a great party atmosphere there as these young boys read themselves in. What they do quite simply is that they read the scriptures and they promise to obey the laws as God has given them to the people of Israel, the Bar Mitzvahs. But it is at this moment of time that the person changes. He is no longer a child. As far as the religious law is concerned, he now becomes a man, and he travels with his father and does all the other things the men do in the temple. Until this moment, he'd had to stay with his mother. But after his Bar Mitzvah, now he can be with his father and the other men. And why I think this was Jesus' Bar Mitzvah was because when they came to leave Jerusalem to go back to Nazareth, there is confusion in the group. See, up until this time, Jesus had always travelled with the women and with Mary, his mother. But now, of course, he's had his Bar Mitzvah. Now he should be with the men. No, the men had a great idea in these days. The women would travel first with the servants, and they'd set up camp and prepare the meals. And the men, later on the day, strolling in, having talked about all important things of their journey, would come into a camp which was prepared and everything was ready for them so they could sit down and have their meal. They really knew how to organize their families in those days. I hope my wife doesn't hear that, otherwise I'm in trouble. But there we are. But when they get down to Jericho that night, Mary says to Joseph, well, where's Jesus? And he says, well, isn't he with you, traveling with the women? No, she says, he's had his bar mitzvah. He should be with you. So they look around the camp, and they find that Mary thought he was traveling with Joseph, and Joseph thought he was traveling with Mary. And somehow, he hadn't traveled with any of the people in the group. They traveled a whole day down to Jericho to get on a very dangerous road. The next day, having slept, probably getting up very early, I can imagine them getting up very early for this. Soon as it broke light, they would set off back up this dangerous road again to go back to Jerusalem. A day down and a day back, 2 days traveling. And then they start looking around. They say, have you seen a young Nazarene boy around here? And they say, well, yeah, we did see somebody in the temple. Because in the temple, of course, the rabbis would set up their schools with their disciples, and they'd be teaching them about the scriptures. And the rabbis used to teach in a particular way. They'd throw out a question, the person would answer. They said, this young boy had a terrific time with these rabbis. We'll go on and see what happened with that again when we think about it tomorrow.